My name is Isadora Gabrielle Leidenfrost, and you are watching TV for Your Soul.
Hi Isadora, I'm so excited that you are here. It's such a blessing for us all to have you in our studio and to talk about your movie, Things We Don't Talk About, the Red Tent movie. So what started you on the path to doing that film?
Well, thank you very much for having me here. It's such a blessing. Basically, I started the process of this film production. I'd participated in Red Tents for many years before even starting the film. So I do feel like I'm actually a part of this movement. It's not just, this was a film that came to me that I decided I wanted to do. This was always something that I really respected and participated in. And my dear friend ALisa Starkweather, she sent me an email one day and said, can you make a short video for the Red Tent movement? And actually the day before I was walking a labyrinth. And I was with my friend Susan, and she said to me, I remember saying to her, I feel like I have no ideas for my next film, and every idea that comes to me is just another idea that's not going to bring a value to the world. And so the labyrinth was in a Catholic church, and there was a confessional right nearby, and I decided to go confess that all of my ideas were terrible and that I wasn't going to do any more thinking about films until the universe sent me an idea that was really going to matter. So the very next morning, I got this email from ALisa Starkweather saying, will you make this film? And I was like, well, she wanted me to make like a short video. I'm like, well, how about I spend the next 7 years of my life making a really, really long video and a feature-length film? And that's basically how I came to this project. And it just, the moment that she said it, I was like, yes, this is my project. This is my project.
Wow. So have you been working for 7 years on this film already, or is that the long-range plan?
That's the start to finish date. So I've been working on it since 2008 so far. So already 4 years, and then there will be, the screenings and promotion. I'm estimating the lifespan of the film maybe would be an additional 3 years.
Wow. Isadora, for our viewers who are not familiar with the Red Tent, could you explain what it is to them?
Sure. Basically, what a red tent is it's a women-only space. It has red fabrics in a variety of its decoration. Sometimes it's more elaborate, sometimes it's less, depending on the group. There are red tents all over the world. My film documents, there's actually 168 red tents throughout the world that I have found, and that are actually doing this on either a monthly basis or a quarterly basis or a yearly basis. And basically, a red tent is a woman-only space. It has these red fabrics, and women come together to celebrate being women. Some women do it to celebrate menstruation. Some women do it to have a place for self-care and rest and just taking care of each other as women, talking about things that we don't talk about. It depends on the group. But basically, I came to it, the Red Tent that I participated in, and still do, it's a women's festival in Pennsylvania. It's called Where Women Gather, and I go to that red tent every year. It's this 4-day-long women's festival, and I just love that space. And that space is more of like a lounging self-care type space because it's at a big festival rather than a specific monthly basis group.
Nice. So tell me a little bit more about what you do in a red tent.
Well, women do a lot of things in a red tent. Sometimes, as I mentioned, it's a self-care space. It's a place for you to just sit and read a book, or you can engage in a conversation with sometimes your red tent sisters or new friends or complete strangers. And it just provides that really safe space. Sometimes it's equated as like a sacred space. It doesn't necessarily have always a specific spiritual denomination to the red tent, because there are women participating in it from all religious and spiritual backgrounds. But sometimes there's conversations about that, sometimes there's conversations about other things, but ultimately women talk about and do things that are common to our generation, that are common to our life experiences, whether it be talking about rearing children, having children, raising children, menstruation, sex, whatever, any list of topics that have to do with things that we care about.
Yeah. So what kinds of things have you discovered that surprised you? Because you've been a witness to all of these groups of women that go to their tents fairly regularly. And yeah, so you've been there like as almost like a fly on the wall, but not really. You're a goddess in the room with them, witnessing.
Yeah, I took a lot of care to, I like your idea of fly on the wall. I decorated all of my camera equipment in these long red dresses, and they're almost wearing like lingerie, and they have boas and they have tiaras, and I really tried to make it so that my filming was not intrusive of people's experience, women's experience in the space. And I would say the thing that has surprised me the most, and it's actually not very surprising, is that the red tent creates a bond among women that is unlike any that I've seen in any other type of women's spirituality event. Just the way the red tent is often, it can be described like a womb. So, if you took that, symbolic icon of this space being like a womb, all these other women are in the womb with you, and you feel like you're just really bonded. And women open up in ways that, they feel like they've never shared these things. And that is, it's not surprising to me because I've experienced it myself, but I just love it when I see, a woman come into the space for the first time. She's never participated in any kind of women's circle or gathering or anything, and she's like, I didn't think I was going to talk, and then all of these things start coming out, and things that she's maybe never shared with anyone. And I like to watch those kind of situations because, that's what the promise of this movement is. The promise is, it's allowing women who have never had an experience like this, and then it's allowing the women who have had experiences like that to be almost like a midwife in service to other women of any age, whether they're 9 years old or 80 years old or 40 years old or whatever.
Yeah, I love it. I've been to a red tent too. I have a red tent that that you've been to our red tent too in Salem, and it was so beautiful because we could express our joys and our sadness. We had fun playing and we cried with each other. It just depended on the moment of what a woman was going through at that time. And I love the fact that we do check-ins. So when you were filming the different red tents you were going to, were you noticing certain rituals that each tent kind of had that was their own?
Well, the biggest thing is that the red tent is very spontaneous.
Yeah.
It's not like we have this set plan and we are going to do this and then you are going to do that. There's often a common time where a lot of the red tent groups do have like circle time, where there's a circle and then one woman speaks and then the next woman speaks and then everyone's listening to that one woman and really hearing her story and witnessing her story. And so there's that aspect, and then there's also just the intimate conversations. That's really the most I think special part is those intimate conversations. With that you're not planning like what you're going to say or what you're going to talk about. You just kind of like bring your honest and true self, and other women are doing the same, and that's a really beautiful experience.
Yeah, it's like women have permission to be themselves and also to learn about, I think the whole concept of the red tent is we're learning about womanhood through each other as well. Like in the book, The Red Tent, yeah. That's what it was about. It's you go to this place, it's your sacred space for the time of the month when you're menstruating, which once upon a time women all did at the same time. They followed the moon cycle. And they learned from each other about birth control or their menstruation or, like you were saying, child rearing, and share their stories, which is so empowering. So have you seen like that? Have you seen in your witnessing like the spark of, come through a woman when she all of a sudden is getting what she needs or feeling empowered from her experience there? Or what kind of empowerment pieces have shown up for you as you've been doing your work?
The interesting thing is that I see that spark almost in every single woman that walks through the door, regardless of it, whether or not it's a little transformation that she overcame or a huge one.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really like about the red tent that you participated in is you have this thing where it's like we check our titles at the door. And I haven't seen that at a lot of other red tents, but I have found that a lot of women do that without actually doing it. And the thing, I would say that probably the most empowering experience that I've documented and that I've witnessed has been, really women. There's a clip that's actually in the trailer, and it's part of the peak of the film, that talks about women overcoming, or a specific woman overcoming this fear or, defective character of not feeling good enough. And we see her basically overcome that, and we see her, standing in her power and really becoming her true and honest self, and the women around her supporting her in that process. So that was a really beautiful moment. But there have been lots of experiences like that, sometimes they don't need to be these big grand gestures, but sometimes it's that little spark where all of a sudden you see, just shifts. It's like a light went on, and then.
Yeah. That thing about a woman feeling that she's not good enough I think is such a common theme for women. I think that's one of the reasons why something like the red tent is so important, because it's a false identity that so many of us carry. And having a sacred space to be with other women, like you were saying, it's like a way for them to kind of feel empowered through their connection. So do you have other special moments, clips from your film that were just touched you so much that you want to share with us?
There's so many of them. There's actually this one beautiful little shot that I captured, and it's not so much that it's actually a young girl. And she's probably, maybe 3 years old. And she walks in with her mother, and she's wearing this little unicorn, coat, and it has a little unicorn, and it's just like the cutest thing. And she's the cutest little girl. And she walks in, and her mother's kind of bringing her into the red tent, perhaps for the first time, I'm not sure. And then she takes off her little unicorn coat, and she sits down, and she's just watching all of these other women. And that was actually really beautiful and magical, because it's, if my film or if the red tent movement serves as a promise to our future generations, that was the experience of actually watching her, watching other women.
Yeah.
And I think our young girls, they need to see, women empowering themselves. They need to see a really solid sense of women's community in whatever form that takes. It doesn't have to be the red tent, it could be anything. But I really feel like it's important that, we raise our daughters, and I was raised in that kind of way, of a really strong women's community.
Yes. Oh, that's so powerful. It's so important. That makes me feel so excited to think about that. So were there many red tents where young girls were brought in with their mothers?
I would say that a majority of them, some of them have, some of the red tents actually have pink tents that go with them, that maybe their red tent has decided that there's a lot of children and a lot of daughters amongst the group of red tent women, and they feel like the mothers need that space where they're not mothers.
Yeah.
For 2 hours. So they often have pink tents where the daughters go into these pink tents, and, they have their own little red tent. And then there are some that, there are some red tents, that don't allow younger, children that are not menstruating, and some that do. So it really depends upon, the specifics of each red tent. But I have found a lot of red tents that, especially at the larger gatherings where there are younger girls. Yeah. But honestly, I would really like to see, us inviting, our younger generations, not necessarily every time, but they should have that experience at some point.
I agree. Just when you were describing that little girl, just looking around and seeing all these women, all different shapes and sizes relating to each other, that is so powerful. That is so powerful.
One of the things that, obviously this movement the idea came out of the book, The Red Tent by Anita Diamant. And one of the things that we see in the book, because the book was a menstruation space, is that we didn't just see women menstruating in the space or giving birth in the red tent in the book. We also saw that, the women, the younger girls were there to serve, and they participated, and they had a role there as well. And the same thing with, the older generations, our crone women, our grandmothers, they have a role too, to pass on their stories and share their life experiences. And I think the same thing is true in red tents, nowadays. Although most women who participate in red tents are usually kind of the age range of about 25 to 50.
Yep. You know what I loved about that book, The Red Tent, is that there was the goddess in that book. So the women went to the Red Tent, but and it was still a time of a patriarchal religion because they were Jewish. It was, and they prayed to the goddess Ashtoreth, I think it was. And it was very exciting to read that, to know that the author is speaking back to a time where maybe there was a little bit more balance, you know, and that women did have a symbol of the divine feminine that they could relate to instead of it being all masculine. So, I mean, it's just incredible what has come from that book, and then with the movement, and that women have this kind of space to go to. And I want to go back to the textiles that you went to India many years ago for one of your films to study textiles for goddess textiles. Will you explain what that was?
Sure. Right after I got out of undergrad, I got a grant to go make a film in India, and the film was called Unconscious Eloquence. And the grant was to study Hindu mother goddess textiles, and the tradition was called Matani Pachadi. Mata means mother goddess, Pachadi means cloth, so it's cloth of the mother goddess. And these were essentially temple textiles that would go behind the main, shrine deity, but sometimes if the temple was a smaller one and they couldn't afford, then the textile essentially served as the image of the goddess. And basically what I was doing is I was living with this lower class, lower caste community that was making these vegetable dyed, natural dyed, cotton. They were primarily on cotton, and they were, it's called kalamkari, which is a handwork. It means, kalam means pen, and kari means work, so it's pen work. And they were making these really beautiful textiles, and they range in size. Mostly they're quite large. They're probably about maybe 8 feet. But there were some smaller ones that they would make as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
So was that kind of what got you going on your path towards the Red Tent?
Well, that was one of my first longer films that I had made. That one was a 30-minute film. And India really gave me a sense of permission to do what I felt like I really wanted to do in this world and in my lifetime. Yeah. And India is such it was a blessing, and some people either love India or they hate it, and I just completely fell in love with it. And I was living in the city of Ahmedabad, which is in Gujarat. It's in the northwest state of India. And I was living with these people, and there was about 200 people in the community that make all these textiles, and I was living with them and experiencing their life and documenting their work. And, they really invited me into their family, and they really taught me a lot about what it means to be a woman, what it means to have a spiritual life and have a spiritual practice, and then also living in India, it made me like a citizen of the world. Yeah. And it made me appreciate, how other people and other cultures view things that's different than my viewpoint, and it really broadened me, and that whole experience basically gave me permission to say, what I do is valuable. Yeah. And, there are cultures that are, that have these traditions. There are these cultures that have, goddess textiles, and maybe I could find other traditions as well. So it was one of my first films that I studied goddess textiles. I haven't actually made any other films that were specifically goddess textiles, but I have made several that related to either women or, the Red Tent is it's not a goddess film at all, but the Red Tent movie is not. But there are aspects of women's spirituality that informs the Red Tent movement. It was kind of created within that, women's movement, women's spirituality movement venue. Yeah. So it definitely does inform it.
Well, it keeps occurring to me as I think about your path. When Clarissa Pinkola Estes wrote Women Who Run with the Wolves, and she talks about the red shoes. And one thing that struck me was I don't know if you remember the story, the girl handmade her own red shoes, and Clarissa talks about the importance and the value, but really the importance for a woman to have a handmade life where she can patch together her life, be the creative director of her life and make what feels good to her. And I get that sense, like you're on that path, you're making your handmade life, and you're also witnessing, from the textiles to, the whole path to the red tent, how women put together their red tents, like how one does it differently than the next, the significance of this. And have you noticed, the significance for women in this creative aspect of what they're doing with the red tent?
Absolutely. I feel incredibly blessed to do what I do. And I love your idea of talking about I have a handmade life, because I do really feel like it that way. I've always had the idea that, if I love what I do, then I'll never really work a day in my life. And I'm actually seeing in the Red Tent movement and in my filming of these women that there are women out there that are doing that as well. And they're bringing these red tents as a form of service to other women. And it just feels like such an honor to be able to take part in that process. And I feel really blessed. I mean, every morning I wake up and I'm joyful and I'm happy, and I love being able to work on this film, and I love being able to, it just makes me feel like I'm waking up and I turn on my computer and I edit this film, and it's like I'm experiencing the goddess right in front of me and I'm working on her, her movie. And I don't really feel like, I feel like almost like a channel when I make the film. I'm just basically saying, okay, this is for all of you. This is something that I'm doing in service, and just let me be like a channel or like a funnel, and make my keystrokes, weave the patterns that you want to weave. So
nice. So when you think about the goddess, what is that energy for you?
Well, the goddess, for me, she really revolves around two contrary aspects. For me, there's the very loving and compassionate aspect of the goddess, and then there's another aspect that's like the 2x4, that's like, stand in your truth, stand in your power, and, get on track. And so sometimes I have this like Baba Yaga experience with the goddess, or with other people that are channeling the goddess to try to teach me something. And I'm actually really appreciative of both, because it really keeps me on my path of truth and of honesty, and living as a person with integrity.
Yeah, nice. I think that some of the people that are watching this show, this whole concept of goddess is brand new to them. And it's not my intention, or I think anyone's intention, to bring necessarily religion into it. It's more like, these role models or these archetypes or things, divine feminine essences that we can look to as mirrors to our own life. And that's what I love about this whole goddess concept, and about the mythologies that we know about the goddesses from around the world. So I'm wondering if you could share some of your favorite goddesses, or goddess stories, or goddess archetypes that you feel like you relate to, and why.
Oh, there's so many. I mean, I was pretty much raised as this kind of citizen of the world kind of concept, or this multi-spiritual practice. I was never raised with like, we believe this and we follow this specific practice or anything like that. So I will have to say that, I mean, I've lived in 18 countries, that all across the world. I mean, I've traveled in 18 countries and made films in 18 countries, and often it revolved around some sort of spiritual experience or spiritual film or something like that. So my name, Isadora, means gift of Isis. So I've often had a really strong connection to Isis. She really keeps me focused, and like, it's like, okay, I'm living my life in service. But then there's been one film that I made, Creating Buddhas, which is about Green Tara, who as I talk about the compassionate aspect of the goddess, Green Tara is so compassionate, and she you snap your fingers and she shows up. Nice. And then obviously when I was living in India, I've always held a really strong connection to Saraswati, who's the goddess of art and music and knowledge, and that's always been a really wonderful guiding presence for me. And I have a very large statue. It's probably 6 or 7 feet tall in my office, and it's also my red tent of Saraswati, and she really helps me, create and stay focused and understand that, why I do things and, what is the purpose of it. And it just keeps me focused and grounded in that, this is of service to something. This is building culture. This is encouraging other women.
Nice. So you actually use these archetypes and these energies to really help you align yourself to your own path. I mean, where people will pray or meditate or whatever it is. I think it's incredible to have these archetypes that you're aware of, that you can, call in and be like, oh yes, this goddess, she represents focusing. I'm going to think about her right now and bring whatever work I'm doing into focus. Yeah, I love that idea. So is there anything that you would want to share with us that I haven't brought up as a question that has, any wisdom that you've come across or anything that's really touched you on your path that you feel like you want to share with women?
Well, there's this one quote that I kind of live by. It's on the footer of my emails that I send out, and it's kind of, it's not my motto, but it's kind of like my life's mission, is that, you don't serve the world by being fearful. And when you show up with courage, you show other women how to liberate themselves and how to overcome their own, obstacles. And it doesn't serve anyone by being less than you are or showing up as a woman who is less than you are. When we show up with our courage, it gives other women the permission to be courageous as well.
Yes. Yes, that is powerful. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Isadora.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
Thank you.
So this is my gift to the world.
Yes. Thank the goddess for you, sharing your gifts. Thank you.
My name is Isadora Gabrielle Leidenfrost, and I really believe that all women are a gift to other women. And you bring something of service every single time you show up in another woman's life, whether or not you've known them for your entire lifetime or 5 minutes. I believe that there should be a red tent in every village, city, and town, and if you can find one, go.